So for today's workshop, um, let's play a little bit with that idea of what to do when things don't turn out the way that you want. Um, that you've got a really challenging um, uh, a class. It's not going as planned. You're struggling, and your nature journaling experience is um, it's not quite what you envisioned when you were drawing up your lesson plan. Um, any to kind of get you started with this, I'll share a little story. So I'm kind of into nature journaling, and something that really gave me a lot of when I'm out there in the woods and getting to do this, I'm in my happy place. And when Amelia and Carolyn, my daughters, pick up their journals and are going for it, it takes that happy and it brings it to a whole different level. It's a beautiful experience. You're out there in the woods, you're doing nature stuff with your daughters, and you're watching their skills develop and all these like, ooh, right? So the other day, what was going on? My daughters and I took the Roseanne Hanson's tracking class together. She had a free class on tracking and it rocked. So after that, I went out to go do a combination trash pickup, nature journaling, looking at tracks thing. And we collected a bunch of trash. We had a great time. And then we got around to doing the tracking, and everything was sort of, prepped. We'd had this class on it. But the girls weren't into it. They wanted to kind of run around and do other things. And I took it personally. It was interesting. Like you think like, okay, I'm going to have this sort of, Zen thing. Like, sometimes we do this and sometimes we don't. That's exactly where my head should have been. But I was emotionally invested in them being kind of like, oh yeah, let's now do this tracks thing in our journal. And it didn't turn out that way. And I needed to go give Daddy a timeout. And I was sitting there thinking like, I'm a bad parent, I'm a bad nature journaler, I'm a bad nature journal instructor, teacher, person, all these sorts of things, all those kind of things were going through my head. It didn't turn out the way that I had sort of planned this day. And so, and so that happens to everybody. But also I thought it was really interesting for me to notice that I also then took it to the next level of taking that personally. I had a real emotional investment in them being into it. I know they're so good at kind of reading vibes. I'm sure they know that Daddy was off, right? And I know that on lots of things, if something is like, pressure, I don't want them to do it because of pressure from Dad. I want them to be intrinsically into this. But kind of reflecting on that sort of made me, really kind of, I should probably do some real reassessments about how I am integrating these activities with our family and what we're doing. But it was interesting to see that both that they weren't into doing it there at that time, and also then what my reaction to that was. And I also felt it's interesting. I felt ashamed. I felt like I shouldn't be having this. I wrote a book about how to teach nature journaling. How can this be happening with my kids? And I feel also embarrassed telling you folks about that. So I think that's probably why I'm telling you about that, because it's real. So that's my sort of first salvo of sort of opening the topic of when things don't go as you planned. Valerie.
Okay. Hi. Good afternoon. I guess I bring up this topic, excuse me, because it doesn't happen often, but every once in a great while, no matter how much enthusiasm I put into something, no matter how much work I put into something, no matter how much of my heart is in it, sometimes you get the deer in the headlights looking back at you like, what? And I, excuse me, please don't take this wrong, but I think numbers are fun. I truly do. There is in my community so much emphasis on art that when I bring up numbers, I mean, let's face it, it's not a seductive topic to those people. So I mean, that's just an example. If I bring up numbers, it's like, then they look at me like, what? But anyway, it goes back to no matter what I do, I give it my all, my enthusiasm, my heart, I plan. And sometimes it just lands flat and I don't know what to do. I have been advised once that I could only meet people where they are. Take the information to them. That's all I can do. And I try to remember that, but then I think, oh, still I go back to, I could have done better, should have done better. I did something wrong. How do it's all that self-blaming stuff. So that's why I brought up this topic, because I suspect I'm not the only one that's ever experienced that. And it doesn't happen all the time, but it's happened enough. It's like, oh, geez, I feel like a failure in those instances. So I'll quit talking, but that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So yeah, Valerie, I know that feeling of you've given this thing like you're and they're not there. Mm-mm. And I think that you're also expressing some of the same things that I was feeling out there with my kids. Like I felt like a failure, right? I'm bad dad, right? And bad nature journaler, connector, facilitator guy. And it's interesting how for us to just sort of note that sometimes when the lesson doesn't go as planned, and think of how many lessons we do, there's got to be some that go south. And but still how easy it is for that judgment to kind of roll up on us. Can anybody add to this? Share with it. Aisha, hi there.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for sharing such a personal, difficult story, Jack. I'll just share what came to mind, a couple of things. Of course, I can relate, though not with I don't have kids, but with my students, but I'm sure it's extra charged when it's your own kids. Like you just want them to be a certain way, right? We're all feel that from the other end, from our own parents who want us to have exactly their interests. And we just can't in that exact way. And now you're getting to feel it from the other side, right? So I remind you of that. But what also came to mind, struggling with this, is that I've been attending more and more Buddhist meditation talks, over the last few years, partly as a way to deal with climate despair and anxiety and tools. But it applied to so many things. And one of the things that really came through to me was they talked about attachment. And I was always like, yeah, I'm not attached to material things and this and that. But then it finally came out, well, I'm still attached to outcomes of my teaching. That's another form of attachment, that every single student has to be thrilled and excited about what I'm teaching. And is going to save the planet, based on it. And I actually stopped and talked to Jack Cornfield one day after he was teaching at Spirit Rock, because I was in such a bad place about teaching. This sounds familiar. Have I already said this? Maybe I've already said it.
No.
All right.
This is fresh.
Okay. Maybe I've just said to myself, and I talked to him and I said, how do I keep teaching? This is very hard to stay in the environmental field and carry this load of what's going wrong about everything I love. And these kids are not going to grow up for another 20, 30 years. And he said, you cannot be attached to the outcome. You just have to walk the path that calls to you right now. So he's like, get up every day and keep teaching if that's your path, but stop attaching to what it's going to save or who it's going to change, which was a huge shift in thinking for me to think about. And I'm still pondering those words and how do I apply them and how much can I internalize them. So I just wanted to share that, because I know this is a struggle we are all struggling with and finding ways, and it comes out in different ways. And, with you, it came out with your kids, like they must love nature journaling at the same moment as me. And for me, I'm just like, why did that kid actually, not care about the roly-poly or looking at the caterpillar I was showing everybody? Or, there was something every day for, those of us who teach all day long, every day with different groups, and then a learning specialist also came along, and he was the first person who had observed my teaching. And he came to help with one kid, and he was great because he was just like, Aisha, you're amazing, but you cannot win every single kid every single time. Let it go. And I was like, nobody who had seen my teaching had ever said that to me. He's like, take the pressure off. They're 20 completely different beings, and they've come with completely different agendas this morning of their own, which is partly what our school philosophy was too. Is like, remember, each child has their own agenda for what they want to get out of the moment or the day. And you cannot impose too much of your own without reading their agenda. So that's, I'll stop there. That's what I wanted to share.
This is getting good. I'm going to bring Avea in on this, and then also I didn't see that your hand was up, but Laura, I was wondering if I could also bring you in to say some of the things that you've been dropping in the chat, because they're really germane to what we're talking about here. Hey there.
Hello there. So just wanted to also reiterate what other folks have said, that you're a wonderful father. And it's, like I think a lot of us have said now, we can all be so hard on ourselves. And I really appreciate what you said, Aisha, about attachment. And I think that relates a lot to what we teach and what we learn, is we learn about about the things that we're the most attached to. And I can relate to about being hard on ourselves when a kid doesn't like those things. I've tried a few times to bring my son with me to the nature journal outings because I know that other kids go. But if we're really honest, that's not really my son's cup of tea. He's not really that into nature. He's into electronics. And I would get super, like, not anything blaming him. My cat is interrupting. I apologize. I take that back. I guess that she's correcting me. He's very into our cat, and that is nature. And so it's about looking at like what connects him to the nature, and also about accepting his interests for what they are. And for me, that's kind of hard. I feel sometimes I've been very embarrassed that I couldn't instill more of a love of nature in him, and that, you know, he's if people ask him what's up, then he's more likely to start launching into stuff about the PlayStation 4 or about Super Mario Brothers and stuff. And part of it is accepting that that's who he is, and also not pushing so much that he goes from being nature reluctant to being nature aversive. And so I've I've considered like bringing him to other outings, but then I also considered that I know how I am, and I know that when I'm at these outings, I'm going to be really into my friends and into whatever nature we're doing, and that I think that would be sort of doing my son a disservice because I wouldn't be fully engaged with what his pace is. And then I thought at the same time, shouldn't I be bringing him so that I can expose him more to nature and also to my friends so that he has positive adults in his life? And so weighing that and deciding that what I can do is have separate outings with him where we go at his pace, so that then I can go out to these places, like maybe we go to the garden, and if he doesn't really want to stay that long, then that's okay. I won't make him feel badly about that. We just say, okay, that was fun. And we stop it at a point where he's still having fun, instead of it becoming something where he feels forced. Because my son has a very, very strong character and he doesn't like being forced into anything. In fact, he really does not like school and he really doesn't like his teachers. And that's been kind of a struggle trying to get him to engage in the lessons when every single time it feels like forcing him. And so I try to find ways to work around that so that it's just very challenging. And I know that some of those things go a bit deeper, but then I'm constantly judging myself, you know, oh, I'm not good at disciplining my kid. Oh, I'm not good at teaching manners, blah, blah, blah. And I will say more later, but let's just say that I think it's important, like, thank you, sweets. Like Aisha said, to work with our kids where they are, acknowledge what they love. If we're going to introduce nature, find the things that they find the most enjoyable about it. So maybe, you know, maybe we'll be walking along, picking up trash at the beach, and he'll get annoyed with me and want to go home. And then on our way back, we'll see a white-crowned sparrow, and he likes the song of that because he can imitate songs super well. So instead of worrying about continuing to clean, why not just let him enjoy that white-crowned sparrow and imitate the call? You know, the hoo hee 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 hee, except he does it way better than me. So that's what I'm trying to teach myself. Go at his pace, focus on the things that he enjoys about nature, make sure to stop while he's still having fun. And like you were saying, Jack, be careful not to put too many of my own expectations on him. Because for all I know, he might grow up to only like PlayStation 4s and not like nature much at all. And he's still my son and I still love him. So thank you for listening. I think you might be muted, Jack.
That was my most profound thought of the day. But thank you for that. That's really real and present. So that idea of that perhaps what we want to think of kind of the long arc of our sort of parenting experience, not this little moment. And if I get all angsty about this moment, and then that makes this thing really negative. And then that's something that we're going to try to avoid in the future. And you're talking about sort of, there's sort of being the role model and connecting and sort of, and providing opportunities at your son's pace. That is, I like you have sort of, you've got a sort of more back, sort of, you're able to sort of fly at a higher elevation and kind of look down on this experience in a way that I think that's really useful.
Yeah, I was thinking, thank you for that, Ivea. Love that he likes copying the sound of a white-crowned sparrow. And I started thinking, okay, so, what if he was in my class and he's the only one just not wanting to nature journal? Where would we go, right? That's part of what we're trying to also figure out as this group. And it's like, well, could we let him do his thing and at some point jump onto his bandwagon and say our nature journaling now is not going to take the form of using a pencil, it's going to take the form of using our voices, and let's all try and do what this kid is doing, in this case Javier son, let's all try and mimic bird songs. And suddenly we've grown all the other kids' capacities and our own and celebrated his way of connecting with nature. That's what comes to my mind as a teacher of what I would do if he was in my group.
Something else that we like to do for a little while was I would play the songs on All About Birds or whatever website that it was where you could hear the songs. And I would ask him, what does this one remind you of? And he'd listen to the red tail talk and he'd say, oh, that one sounds like a chipmunk screaming for help. And I would try to keep on going with it. But then after a while, he'd be like, yeah, and he'd just kind of do something else. And I remember the first time that happened, I tried to keep pushing, but then I was like, wait a minute, nature reluctant versus nature aversive. And I backed off. I'm like, we'll just grow this love slowly. And now whenever he hears about that, then he gets excited and says that. And plus, I used to read Animorphs to our family, and he didn't totally listen, but he listened enough to remember the names. So now whenever he sees a red-tailed hawk, he's like, oh, look, it's Jake. And I'm like, oh, well, Tobias is the one who morphed it, but yes, you're right, it's an Animorph. So anyways, yeah, I like that. And I really like the idea that you have about having the other class kids also imitate by using their voices to imitate the song. I like that you have that way of adjusting it to what the kids displaying are their strengths, like Rebecca was saying. So thank you.
I think that as moms of kids with some more obvious needs, sometimes, I mean, there's so much we've been able to learn that it's great when we can share it with other people and maybe let them see it. I think that one of the things of really starting to see your child as their own person and that with their own autonomy and their own desires, and to be able to see that their own interests. I mean, my husband and I are both scientists. None of our kids wanted to go do it. And that's probably because they've been taken to science. They've been drugged to science camp because we were teaching and do that. But they love looking at the moon, right? And then my oldest went off to college, and now she thinks she might go into physics, which is just completely blowing my mind. She went off to school where she would never have to take math again, and now she's, I don't know. And I think that sharing your love of things you do is really important for them to see that you have that. And when it's nature, it's even more than that, because it's not just a passion for an activity. You're talking, as you have a lot often, Jack, about a relationship, and you are introducing your kids to nature. But you can't make anybody love somebody in a particular way. you can't even make another person love you in a specific way, right? And so I said something about the circles of influence, and it's something that has really helped me in the last 10 years when I can remember to use it, you know, is that you have this very small circle of what you're in control of, and it's not even your whole self. And then outside of that is your circle of influence, the things that you have some push or pull with, but you're not the only thing that's influencing them. And your children, your spouse, your friends, those are all in that circle. And then um, and then there's and your students. And then there's the stuff you have no control of whatsoever. And if you don't want to be miserable, then you don't spend time fussing and wishing and, oh, if only I could, because you don't have power there. It doesn't mean that sometimes your area of influence doesn't come, go out and, because people are looking in, but I think that you make the biggest positive aspects with that when you're looking out with love and you're trying to be kind to people, then you have more influence and more opportunity. But you have to really recognize when you don't have the power. And it can be heartbreaking. You can worry and care. So I have students who have failed. I have a student who has failed twice. Actually, I have more than one, my class. And the thing is, I have given them support, love, reached out over and over, but there's only so much I can do. And then it has to be their move. And, maybe they're on a journey to learn that they're not going to be a teacher, or maybe they are going to be influenced by the fact that their teacher cared about them a lot and didn't put them down. Maybe I'll have some, but all I can do is be the best at what I can at that moment. And then when I find the times that I haven't done the best thing, or you have to forgive yourself and go on, right? You can't, we look at it as data. Oh, next time we probably shouldn't do this, or we might want to think about alternatives. If we harm someone, we apologize and we try to make things right. And Jack, I have to say with all my heart, your kids signed up and went to a tracking class with you. They went and picked up trash. They were outside enjoying nature. You had a win. It was a win. And you just got to let go of the part that made you think, it wasn't. But my kids don't want to be with the science teacher all the time. Your kids don't want to be with the naturalist all the time. Sometimes they just want dad. And sometimes they just want an adult that will keep them safe but not poke too much into what they're doing and letting them do whatever they like while he enjoys what he enjoys about being outside in this place that they love. So I can talk a pretty good wisdom talk, and I'm not saying that I don't have all these times when I push. As a parent of a child with autism and parents of a child with other issues, there is so much second guessing. I'm sure all parents second guess things, but sometimes other people second guess for you. And there's a lot of judgment. And so part of this learning about forgiving yourself or just recognizing your lack of control is our steps on the journey of a relationship with other people where you're really respecting their individualness, right? Because when it comes down to it, other people are other people, and they have their own minds, and they have their own things they like, and they have their own, and you're not in the driver's seat there. So, and I think especially parents in this country, we have a really hard time with our kids with not realizing that we're not even in the back seat whispering in their ear sometime, you know. I mean, we are just definitely not in the driver's seat. Sometimes we're just, hey. So there, that's the Dr. Laura stuff for today. And by the way, I'm not that
Dr. Laura.
I'm not that Dr. Laura, even though we have the same name. But
Yes. And thank you so much for that. This idea of the second guessing and the judging. We need to sort of how can we, we want to keep our big picture, and on things that make the most difference to us. I think there's a big tendency to really double down on those things, and we're the most judgy of ourselves, the most second guessy on ourselves. So Valerie cares about nature, and when there's not a nature connection going on, we really go into judging mode. And we're doing something here that we care about, whether it's connection with nature, or it is helping the growth of a child, connecting with other people, or raising our own children. It's so easy. The easy button to push is to have somebody else, school your kids for you, and then you don't have to stand in the fire. But if you're working as an educator in this, you have to really regularly show up, and you're doing this because you love it. Or if you are really engaging actively with parts of a child's development or your child's development, the stakes are really high for us. And that's where the second guessing that Laura was talking about comes in, and the judgments come in.
When it comes to my teaching, it paralyzes. What would paralyze me, I still spend too much time preparing, but I would spend too much trying to get it right perfectly. And when I let go of it having to be perfect, and that no matter what, I'm going to come out of this with something, I'm going to learn something from this. And to model that with my students, and to be able to say, oh, well, that didn't work out, or this isn't going the way I thought it was going to go. This, and my students are older and they're going to be teachers, so there's a lot they can learn even just from watching that. But just think about the kid that can see their teacher make a mistake and learn from it and go. That not like one of the most, I mean, even if it's not a mistake, it's not, even if it's just recognizing it wasn't, that probably wasn't my best choice. This might have worked better. To model that, and to model that it's okay to try things passionately, and then assess. And then what do I want to do next? I mean, that is so empowering, and that's taps into that whole growth mindset, that idea that I can try this, and you know what? And if I end up with, that's the kind of thing I would do, is not plan the page, and then the head of the bird is not going to fit on the page, and you know, kind of thing. It's like, well, you can learn from that. There's just so many things you can learn, and to give a child the gift that mistakes are honored, and that they're, I don't even know if we want to call them mistakes, but that the learning, if we honor our mistakes, the learning from them is so rich, right? I mean, it's just, people don't learn a lot by doing things right the first time.
Ooh, say that again, because that's crazy good, and I got to get it down in my notes.
People don't learn a lot from doing things right the first time. You know, think about it as if you were shooting a basket and you got a basket the first time. Chances are it was not any, there was a lot of luck in that. If you're going to learn how to shoot baskets, you're going to have to miss a lot of baskets.
So that's really helpful in kind of our judging and value and sort of that inner critic that the kid doesn't just pop up on a nature journal page, but that inner critic that pops up when we're there with our lesson planned in front of us, and it's not going the way that we anticipated.
It was like that for me all semester this semester. Nothing went, but we still learned some marvelous things, but things did not go where I thought they were going. But and I at least got probably half a dozen students who are going to keep nature journaling. You know, I mean, that's only 10%, but I mean, and a whole bunch of them that say that they're going to do stuff with nature with their students.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm going to add,
right?
Yeah, I'm going to add Aisha back into the conversation here, and also just I want to let folks know that if anybody who wants to share, feel free to use the chat. You can also raise your hand, and there's also under that reactions button, there's a little thing that says raise hand, and you get this little kind of hand icon in the corner of your screen. We do really want to hear from you and share your thoughts. It's interesting that this discussion has kind of gone. I think that we've talked before about kind of how do you deal with things when they go wrong, like, you know, it's time to hike down the trail a little bit further and you can try it again, you know, and sort of on that micro level, kind of problem solving those things. But it's interesting, this topic is the way we've been approaching it. We're looking at kind of a higher level about kind of what is going on in our own heads, and how do we then kind of get ourselves to continue on and with the most potential for sort of a positive connection. Aisha.
Thank you. Trying to remember what I was going to say. Just, this might have been an undercurrent in what Laura was saying. Oop, she just went tiny.
I'll bring her back.
It's okay. Isn't that funny? Like, I hope there's someday where we're not saying somebody went tiny and somebody got big. Strange new world. I was just sort of I wanted to add to that piece with Laura. I felt like it was an undercurrent in what she was saying. And I know she's working with older people, working with adults, but I find with my K-5 students, the piece of that I try and bring in and they really appreciate also is me expressing my own feelings about it all. Like, I felt really bad right now, or I felt really disappointed, you know, using that simpler language with them, of course, but it grabs their attention because it's so real in a way that sometimes my other lessons don't. If I just be like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I didn't, you know, map the timing of this out right. I can't believe class is over in 2 minutes, or nobody got to rotate stations, my fault, you know. And if I'm feeling genuinely upset and I share it, or it's too windy to do what we were going to do, I feel like I like to model that piece too. Just not, you know, it was a mistake, but now I'm criticizing myself and I feel bad. And does anybody else ever feel that way? And, you know, just a bit of group share around that. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, and that's just so powerful, not just in terms of teaching, but if you think about teaching as relationship building with your students or your own children, that being able to be real with your feelings and share that in a way that that's going to help them be able to articulate their feelings as well, and turns you back into a human being. That there's, and if you can't really have a personal relationship with the concept of the teacher, right? But you can have a personal relationship with a human being who is a teacher. And I know that sometimes I kind of, in some educational situations, I'm kind of so into kind of working the logistics of, you know, I sort of think like I'm kind of more in, instead of, you know, being real and myself, I'm more like in puppet master mode and trying to kind of move all these pieces around the educational chessboard. And that's a wall between them having a real encounter with the person. My daughter's, one of my daughter's teachers is really good at sort of, you know, well, not just sort of the classroom management, but also that sort of break it down and be personal and present for the students. And my daughter absolutely loves her, and I think that she lets herself be, as you're saying, sort of real in the presence of those kids. And so, yeah, that's not just teaching, that's relationship building.
And one of the things that helped me sort of do more of that is I worked at a school that was Reggio inspired. I don't know if some of you have heard that educational term, and they consider relationship building with the student as one of the cornerstones of the teaching practice, which was nice because then there was always kind of there at the forefront for all of us. It was one of the things we were reviewed on, like, how's your relationship with your students? Right? So you actively had to think about it. And of course, all of us working there were drawn to that, which is kind of why we were there. But it's wonderful that that's actually part of an educational philosophy. That was also the one that, you know, I was referring to earlier, that the children are showing up with their own agenda. It's not just going to be your agenda. And that's part of the Reggio philosophy as well. They call it high image of the child. To counteract the, hey, they're here as a vessel to be filled with your knowledge and instruction. And I think there's different educational philosophies sort of saying the same thing now. But I'm most familiar with the Reggio because I was in a couple of Reggio.
How do you spell Reggio? What is?
Reggio. And
Emilio Riaggio.
it's from the region of Reggio Emilia in Italy. And so schools that do it in other countries, they usually use the term Reggio inspired because obviously they're not in Reggio itself. And it's most prominent in preschools, like that's where it developed. Yeah, I see Laura nodding, I'm sure.
Both my girls went to Reggio preschool.
Okay. And it's growing now into higher levels. And they're sort of trying to figure out how do we take some of that and combine it with academic things that have to be met for older levels. And that's still a very much work in progress. But yeah, it's great because it does make you come to that more genuine point of sharing. Like even Jack, you modeled by starting us all off with how it went with your girls at one time, you know, like immediately got us to that feelings place of a difficult feelings we all have. And look how deeper you got us going because of doing that, right? And I think that's what we're trying to do with our other students as well, is like, can we keep this a bit deeper? But I'm going to add something to that, actually, because one thing that came to mind is, and Jack, you were saying too, is like keeping in mind, as I've realized, as one of those teachers who fried every cell this year and had to drop out, is like, you can't always be in that place because it takes a lot out of you as well. And there's times where it feels right. And there's other times you just got to keep a bit of that wall and just proceed with the nuts and bolts, because taking the wall down for group after group, especially if it's unfamiliar groups, because I know some of you are educators who just work with people who just flow through once or twice. You know, I'm trying to do more work around what to do with the fact that I'm a freaking empath and it's about to kill me. And how does one find the right level of boundary and openness? And I think it's different for everybody. And honestly, it's got to be different every day. And for women going through their cycles, it's got to be different throughout the month. So I just kind of want to throw that on into the big package as well.
I am so grateful to all of you for helping us take this conversation to a deeper level. In one of our silence, so telephone will not distract me from this important test. Stop it. Thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. There's a little button. Yep, there's that little button. Now it's orange. Now it's quiet. I think we had a previous one where we kind of workshop kind of hacks and fixes for kind of getting something kind of back on track when there's a logistical challenge. In this workshop, we were able to start to kind of look more deeply at ourselves as a player in this, and the maintenance of the teacher. And if we're going to be what's going on outside? We're going to pause here for it seems that we're having a nature moment. Remove spotlight.
Can we see it or not showing up?
Oh, there we go.
And sometimes the fawns are along, so I was hoping it was the fawns.
Oh.
Not with this one. Hello. Hello.
Oh, what a wonderful way to wrap up our program here. Just sort of remind us that that nature is out there doing its thing. We can have a bad day, and the white-crowned sparrows are still singing. And to come back to that. We've had a number of really interesting ideas shared here about when your lesson plan is tanking. Perhaps the more important thing is that you're a human being that is in relationship with other human beings. And maybe this is an opportunity to demonstrate how you handle things when things don't go quite as you planned. That it's not about you, and that, but it is about you. So consider yourself part of the equation, and we want to do what we can to take care of ourselves. And that there's so much judging and second guessing that we can do to ourselves. And that can be paralytic. And let's just sort of remember to kind of go back to the little deer in the meadow, back to that white-crowned sparrows. When a lesson doesn't go the way we wanted, somebody pointed out earlier that you're still outside in nature, and there's lots of research that says, you're doing a whole lot right just by doing that. The lesson plan didn't come out the way you wanted. There's a whole lot of other things that are going on that are still working in your favor, and that the circumstances of the world, sometimes it's not going to end up the way that you had anticipated, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean you weren't cut out for this. I also want to encourage there has been a lot of some very kind of raw, honest things that were shared in this workshop. The more that we as nature journaling educators can talk about these things and be able to share them with each other and be there as support for each other, it's going to keep us in this for the long term. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And if we are going to be in this long term, one of the things that's going to help us is if we feel safe asking each other for help when we need help, and we all feel kind of ready to sort of be there at that water station for each other when we need it. So thank you all so much for being here. All right. Until next time, my friends, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, take care of this planet. And while you're at it, let's grab those nature journals and go out in the moonlight and see what we learn.